Well, everyone, in the sake of time, we'll kick off now, dead on time. My name's Simon Fruscia. I'll introduce the panel in a minute. We're going to be talking about lights, camera, webcasting. So basically, corporate events, how webcasting is being used within the corporate sector, for the event sector, and just kick some ideas around. So I'll introduce myself, then the panel. So my name's Simon Fruscia. I'm the Operations Director in EMEA for TalkPoint. We're a webcasting company who do managed webcasting and self-service. My background, I've been at TalkPoint for 2 years. Previously to that, I was head of AV at BT, running the studios at BT Centre, the head office, for 13 years. So I've been streaming for about 15 years now. I've had a lot of hands-on experience. Probably got about 3,000 or so events under my belt for live webcasts. Previously to that, I was with Metro Video and Reed Publishing in-house, and actually I was at the Royal Society of Medicine, where I started off in the AV industry about 23 years ago, which is indeed where Kevin comes from. But that's enough about me. So the topic today is really to explore the event industry, really the corporate event industry, how webcasting is being used, what kind of vertical sectors it's being used in, etc., and how perhaps that may grow out in the next few years. But I'll introduce the panel now. So on this side here is Nick Eve. Nick's the Managing Director of Pump House Productions. Founded the business in 1989 after 12 years, basically in rock and roll, I think Nick would say. So Pump House being a production agency primarily involved in creating, designing and implementing communication programs using face-to-face, experiential, exhibition and digital formats. Pump House's core business is really within the FTSE 100 companies, historically providing high quality services in the telecoms industry, where indeed I met Nick when I was at BT. Working with companies at board level through to front-end employees and customers, they provide a focus on providing consistently strategy-led presentations at events delivered with innovation and enthusiasm. Nick, or Pump House's client base encompasses a wide range of sectors, include BT, BT OpenReach, Centrica, BAE Systems, ARM, TUI, KPMG, Macmillan, BP, United Biscuits, Yahoo, Pokémon and more. They're based in Hertfordshire. 80% of their business, which is quite interesting, we'll come on to Richard, is in the UK. And currently most of their energy, Nick tells me, is spent in devising ways to communicate and engage customers and employees for clients with severely restricted budgets. So thanks, Nick, and thanks for being part of the panel. So next to Nick is Richard Coburn. Richard co-founded On Screen Productions 20 years ago, when, as he tells me, he was younger and slimmer and somewhat, say, less attractive. The last 15 years before that were spent at the BBC, starting in sound, before moving around in production and project management. So Richard comes from a TV background. So today, On Screen Productions helps ambitious health, science and technology companies to communicate, launch and promote their products and services using a wide variety of on and offline media, exhibition booths, design and events. At the core is really specialist ethical pharmaceutical area, healthcare and medical devices. Recently undertaking accreditation training to remain updated in the European and global rules and regulations in the pharmaceutical world. Again, many of their clients well known, pharmaceutical and healthcare, including Johnson & Johnson, Bayer, Shire, Takeda, and United Therapeutics, and they've just formed a specialist medical education division. Interestingly, Richard's companies is 90% of the work outside of the UK, as opposed to Nick's 80% inside the UK. And Richard's first major webcast was in Athens in 2005, a 9-camera shoot, local audience of 9,000, and a global web audience that peaked at 65,000, which back in those days was challenging Akamai, CDN, and simultaneously webcast expert analysis of the main webcast on a separate stream. So Richard, welcome and thank you for being part of the panel today. One of Richard's main concerns or his issues that his clients see is overcoming enthusiasm of corporate IT departments and preventing anything from reaching their end clients, and we'll discuss that in a bit. So on to Kevin. Kevin McLaughlin from the Royal Society of Medicine. It's nearly 20 years in the AV industry, working within conference and meeting venues. So Kevin's currently AV manager at 1 Wimpole Street, the home of the RSM, the Royal Society of Medicine, and Chandos House. So literally 2 minutes from Oxford Circus in the centre of London. It's an in-house team supplying AV service and support across the conference and meeting rooms of the 2 venues. The RSM has been utilising on-demand stream video for the past 5 years, but access to hundreds of medical lectures available online to the general public. As an educational charitable institute, the continuing professional development of medical professionals is the mission of the RSM to use online videotape at one of the most largest providers of CPD points in the country. And as Kevin's other hat, literally the One Wimpole Street is a commercial venue. He recently introduced live and on-demand streaming as a service to external clients using the venue's lecture theatres and meeting rooms. So we'll come on to that. So it's a cloud-based solution that the AV team run themselves. So just very quickly before I join the panel over there, can I have a show of hands? Is anyone here from a production house or an event staging company? Anyone from that structural? So a couple of you. And out of those, so do you either of you do webcasting yourselves, or have you done webcasting in the last 12 months? Okay. And again, anyone here who actually works at a venue or runs a venue at all? No, okay, fine. Right, I'll join the guys over here and we'll kick off. What we'll aim to do is have not formal, but a Q&A at the end. But if you've got any burning questions, stick your hand up and we'll come across and take a question. So I want it to be interactive. We've got 40 minutes, we'll keep it lively. So what I'll do first of all is, for the three of you, how much streaming in general have you done? I mean, Nick, as an example, you run a face-to-face, mainly event company. In the last year, how many streams would you say off the top of your head you've done, live streams?
I suppose in the last year we've done one. That just shows you. So, but over the years we've done a few. It's not the main. It hasn't been the main focus of our clients, not our situation, but our clients. So, yeah. And
Richard, same to you. So just a generalisation of how many roughly?
2. But however, I think the important thing is that, as you know, we've talked about, I guess, 50 or 60, and I think that it is interesting that I think that webcasting, webinars, whatever you want to call it, are now coming of age. I think clients have been burnt for far too long, and that was the reason they weren't doing it. And I think now that the environment has changed, and I think that this means that the potential for doing more, and we came from a pitch this morning where we were talking about weekly webinars, and that's something that 6 months ago just weren't being discussed. So I think the environment, the world is changing.
And so Kevin, you've recently put webcasts on your portfolio. So how many, roughly would you say in the last 12 months?
Well, I think when I was discussing it as a business case to my boss, I was suggesting that we needed 1 to 2 a month to break even, as it were. Unfortunately, we're managing about 1 a month at the moment.
No, fine. No, thanks, guys. That's interesting. Again, we see, we've got 2 very well-known production houses here and a London-based commercial venue. So not literally hundreds going out the door on a monthly basis, which is quite interesting. So if I talk about client sectors, again, Richard, if I start with you, if I may. I know you do a lot of work in the pharmaceutical space. Whether they've done it or whether they wanted to do it, what pharmaceutical as a sector, what would you say in terms of webcasting of events?
I think that the pharmaceuticals is a very interesting case. We particularly work in global, Europe, Middle East and Africa communications. British Airways say that on average at any one flight they've got 5.5 doctors on each flight travelling from one event to another. Budgets are being cut. Everybody's examining what they do in the way of meetings, conferences. Last week we were at in Berlin at a meeting where 25,000 roughly diabetologists assembled. Now 25,000 diabetologists in Berlin is a lot of people. And at that meeting, I guess there were 12, 15 simultaneous smaller conferences going on within the bigger conference. How many of them were webcasts? Well, actually all of them. And they were a webcasting service that was being provided free of charge by the organisers, the European Association for the Study of Diabetes. However, their view of what a webcast was and what my view of a webcast was varied. Their idea of a webcast was sound with slides. Now, that could work and may work if you've got a very technical subject where that's all you need. But as Simon said, I come from a world of television. And I believe that if you're going to have things that work, they have to be televisual. It's no good just having bloke at lectern, bird at lectern, and a few slides. That, to me, is useless. I think that what our clients are now looking at is that there's new rules, regulations, they can't sponsor doctors to fly around the world, etc., etc., etc. They're looking at ways of extending the length, extending the period of time that this meeting, remains valuable to a target audience. And I think this is where webcasts are going to really come of age. I think that the pharmaceutical industry particularly is absolutely spot on for webcasts and webcasting. And I think that we are seeing changes. However, we've been burnt. I think anybody that's been at all involved in webcasts or webcasting, yeah, the one we did in Athens, a few years ago was incredibly successful. But I put into that the same techniques as you would for a television program. So we had satellite links back from Athens back to BT Tower. We had encoders in BT Tower or local. We had a separate stream locally. Thank you very much indeed. Belt and braces. Used the Akamai content delivery network. Fine. The following year, a different client saw what we'd done there. Yes, we want to do this, but weren't prepared to put in the extra money. We still had a satellite link back to the in-house encoders, but we actually lost 20 minutes of transmission because a $25 router in a locked room failed, and we couldn't find the right person to have open it up. And I think that to some extent that's the problem. The internet was never designed in the first place for webcasting and webinars, and it is only something I think has come of age in the last, people talk about Web 2, Web 3, etc., etc. But I think really it's only sort of if that's my mother, tell her I'm not in. I think that it's only really come of age in the last few years, particularly as connectivity to homes, connectivity to offices improved. But one of our clients, Bayer, we talked about 6 webcasts last year, and one of the things that they absolutely insisted upon was that everyone around the world had equal opportunity to view. Now, unfortunately, that's just not possible. That we were talking about somebody in sort of a province in China with a dial-up had to have the same service as somebody sitting in London with fibre to the cabinet. And I think that is the problem. I think we're getting better at transmitting it. It's just the receive end doesn't seem to be working. And I also think that the other thing, as Simon also said, is that the information terrorists, the IT departments, we do have, true stories of companies that have removed the sound cards from laptops. Why? Well, we don't want the sales reps possibly looking at any video. Well, then how are you going to do the webcast? Well, it's not our problem. We want to prevent them from watching dodgy porn movies. And I think that I think is a huge issue. The IT departments have not actually kept up with or caught up with what we in this room are now offering as a service.
Nick.
Yeah, I think my experience is slightly different of that, really. I mean, I think this is about education, really, to a degree. Our experience was some years back being approached by clients to say, look, we're in a world recession. We have a major problem with our spend. We've got to be green. We need a solution here that's going to provide us the experience that our delegates get on a one-to-one or a face-to-face conference, and we've got to do this electronically. There must be some whizzy things that you can provide, you guys in Pump House and the production agency business. So we looked into being polite and respectful people. We looked into things like Second Life and the building of avatars and all of that stuff, and the age of virtual conferencing was on us. Got to get involved or you're going to lose out, Nick. Actually, we've come a long way from that point, and obviously that was complete no-brainer because clients perceived it as gaming and not serious conferencing and not a serious corporate communication program. So now we're in a much better place. We have much better bandwidth. We have everything. As we know, we're in a fantastic age of communication. It boils down to, for me, running a production company, it boils down to what does my client want the experience to be? So you have to ask that question. What do you want your experience to be when you're communicating? The very fact that some of you guys are in this room here means that face-to-face communication, for me, still is the best. Of course, it's the best ever because you're here and you're trying to interact with us in this room. So what does that give you that being on the end of a PC doesn't? And it's really our remit. However, we all recognise, and we've had a bit of discussion, funnily enough, before we came on the stage here, and we're all very much of a similar mind. So the idea is to create something out of a hybrid, perhaps, of communications platforms, to create something that's exciting for our clients, and that's what it's all about for me.
So, you know, on that, I mean, whenever someone says to me, like, I want to do a webcast of an event, I say, well, okay, is it a webcast of an event? Sorry, is it a webcast event, or is it an event that's being webcast? You know, in my mind, they're two very separate things. You know, one's a camera at the back, following the action on stage. The other one's engaging communication with the remote audience. So, have you found, I mean, when you have done the webcast, I think maybe one for Richard, that people are, or clients are prepared to change the content, maybe the length of time of what they're doing, that would have been a 4-hour symposium with, you know, 50 speakers, through to saying, no guys, it's got to be focused, shorter, sharper, it's TV for the web you're making. Do clients listen to that? Is that a barrier in terms of pushing these communications forward?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. You know, if you look at the sorts of things that we've been asked to consider webcasting and some of the projects we have coming up in the next 12 months, some of them are 3 or 4 day meetings, you know, where you might have 2,000 people in the audience or 500 people in the audience, doesn't matter, it's 3, 4, 5 days. Now, nobody is going to watch that on the web for 3 or 4, 5 days. There might be some keynote parts of it that you would put on there, but I think that is where we've actually got to step back, and I think the question you make is very, very important. The thing that we talked about this morning was actually forget the event altogether, so we actually use a studio, and it's easier using a studio because they've got good connectivity, etc., where you have a sort of an almost question time like program, where you've got 2 aspects to it. You've got the live aspect to it, where you can invite an audience anywhere in the world to submit questions by email, by TBU, telephone broadcast unit, whatever. And so it actually becomes a live interactive event. But the archive of that is as equally important as the live event, because giving events longevity is what everybody is now talking about. I think, though, that then we get asked frequently to do, could you do a highlights package? No, you can't do a highlights package. There is no way on God's earth that you can cut 5 days down to 1 hour. Doesn't work. But what we are being asked, what we're being asked to do, what we're suggesting to our clients is, what we will do is we will make a program about the 5-day conference where, you know, we might interview some of the key speakers, do little packages, wrap it all up so it becomes a 1-hour magazine program. And that is of great interest. That gives you longevity to that event. It has the advantage of being a trailer for that event for the next time you run it, but it also gives people the sort of the potted history of what went on in a televisual way. And I keep on using that word televisual. You know, it has to have that appeal. It has to have everything. So in answer to your question, I think actually it's changing completely. There are some events that, I mean, if it's an AGM or something like that, well, then that's entirely reasonable to make that a webcast because, you know, you want shareholders to take part. If it's a sales conference, that's something entirely different. As if it's a learned academic debate, then that's different again. Or is it a sales thing? And I think that what's actually got to happen is you've got to develop your programs or develop what you actually transmit to match the medium of the web.
Kevin, one for you. You know, when you adopted webcasting at the RSM, was there a perceived fear, perhaps from management in terms of revenue from now a commercial venue at number 1 Wimpole Street, that, hang on, less bums on seats in the venue means catering budgets have gone down. Okay, there's a revenue opportunity now with webcasting, but is one going to fill the gap of the other? I mean, what was your findings on that when you took webcasting forward as an idea?
Well, I think from a management point of view, that, there was no fear from that. They thought it was an extra revenue stream. But I think from a client point of view, every client, in fact, is scared of the cannibalisation of the live audience. And it's something, it's a conversation to go through with every single client that we discuss streaming with. I mean, there's almost a mantra that I've got in sales pitch, as it were, and you alluded to it earlier, Richard. It's about firstly expanding the audience beyond the venue, and then extending the shelf life of the event itself. And I mean, that is the sales mantra, as it were, that can sell streaming to a client.
Would you say your client base, Kevin, see as a success a virtual person watching a webcast as a successful viewer as someone bum on seat here? You know, are they got equal kind of, yeah, great, we had 50 people in a room and we had 500 people watching. What is that one seat virtual the same as one seat in the room in terms of their ticking a box?
They still prioritise the actual audience, but
the audience in the room.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. But having said that, I mean, another selling point of streaming is the fact that if they're online at this event, that encourages them to actually attend live the next event.
So like an advert, like Richard was saying, really. So.
That's right. I mean, this whole issue of cannibalising events, I've even had to convince our own sales team when we've held our own events. We have technology masterclasses, that kind of event where we stream them live, and they're like, oh, well, let's not advertise it until the very last day, you know, because we don't want to scare anybody off from coming. And so I can't even convince my own colleagues, as it were, you know, because this is a real fear, and because they see that's where the real revenue is coming from.
So Nick, for turn to you. So as a face-to-face, you know, in the main face-to-face event company, do you see it as a fear saying that if I really start pushing webcasting, my core business, i.e. running live events, may go down? Do you look at that as consideration?
No, not at all. In fact, quite the reverse. I think maybe it's stupidity here, actually. I think it's the webcasting scenario is, well, look at conferencing as a whole. Okay, so you look at conferencing, so this is a slightly different, you know, conference effectively, or a meeting. The best conferences for me, the ones that we try and involve our clients in, have more interactivity. So the more interactivity that you can have, the more involvement that you can get your audience, the better. So for me, you know, with a suite now with apps and all sorts of, you know, connectivity that you have and functionality that you have, full stop, you know, we really do have an opportunity to expand this. And I'm thinking, okay, let's not just think of an audience of one on a webcasting. Let's go away from the fact that here I am at my PC at work and I'm watching a webcast and I'm on my own. You know, there is nothing to say that we can't group these people together in a room like this, and we can do a webcast with all over the world, and it's interactive, and we can interact with that using apps, using you know, IML technology, using handsets, whatever you want, or even people doing little breaking and doing little team building exercises and then feeding back into the main hub. All of that is possible now, and much more than possible. It's fun, and the bottom line is, and as I said earlier, the most important thing for clients is to try and cut out the travel situation, but still create this fantastic buzz of a one-to-one, face-to-face rather, experience. And that, for me, is the way we should be going. And I think it's exciting.
So do you think on that, I mean, the content, if you were sat here and watching a webcast coming in, that if you're in a group experience, you're more engaged than you would be sat up at your desk upstairs?
Completely, absolutely.
So you're away from
and I think
distractions.
the nervousness that clients still have when I speak to them about webcasting, the nervousness that they have is that, you know, going back to just the audio call. So how many times have you sat in an audio call and you're doing other things? You're on email, you're doing other things, you're writing reports, and someone says, so what do you think, Nick? And you go, sorry, oh, I missed that shit. You know, I wasn't concentrating. So the audio is just, your disconnect is huge. So what we're trying to do is not have the same disconnect on a webcast. And it's too easy if you're on your own, so let's involve other people in our webcast. Could be groups of 3, doesn't matter. That's what I think.
But again, I think it's back to that, you know, a webcast event, not a webcast of an event, in that scenario.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But this comes down to production. Yeah. This comes down to what we do. It is production. If you just wanted the equivalent of an audio telecon, well, that's not production. That's just people talking to each other. I don't know what it is. I wish there were less of them. My heart sinks every time I go onto a telecom and, oh yeah, we got 14 people on this. What the hell is that about? I think there's 2 points you made there, Nick, which were really, I mean, first of all, production. if it doesn't have production values, if it isn't televisual, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't engage the audience, and the audience can't interact with it, just forget about it. It's just bloody pointless. But I also think this whole idea of the viewing environment needs to be examined very carefully. Our most successful ones that we've done are where, for example, you're doing an internal one. You might do the transmission from the head office, doesn't matter where it is, but then what you try and do is get groups of people together at the receive end. And certainly one of the things that worked a couple of years ago fantastically well is that we asked sales reps to bring together 6, 10 of their customers, and the Hilton Hotel, we didn't do this actually on the web, we actually used a private broadcast television service. But what we did, and I realize now how spectacularly good it was, is there was a rep or two in a hotel room, there was 6 or 7 of their customers, and they all watched the same thing together. So if you like, there was engagement there because it meant that somebody in Munich, Milan, Rome, wherever, were able to engage with their customers on a one-in-one. They were able to have all that stuff that's so lovely, touchy-feely, share coffee, share network, and also join in with the overall event. And that was a great way of doing things. So I think that to some extent, we do become a little bit obsessed about the transmission and don't think enough about the reception end.
Well, on that, I mean, talking of transmission, and obviously both of you, more than Kevin, obviously you're around the world, around the country, running events in different locations. I mean, how are you finding, a typical hotel chain? You go in there and say, like, I need to do a webcast, I need a meg uplink guaranteed. One, they just look at you blankly, or two, they present you with a bill which is so crazy that you may as well roll up the OB truck to do it. I mean, how you find that?
Hotels, utter, on the whole, pile of complete shite. Okay. I'm sorry, but if... No! How many times, internet connection at hotels is seen as a revenue stream. You go into some hotels, well, yes, for just $25 a night, you can have 24-hour access to the internet. Oh, do fuck off. I mean, I've got it on my laptop. I've got a perfectly adequate 3G card in my laptop, which is, it's nothing. I think that the venues have got to stop being frightened of it, and they actually start having to embrace it. The first hotel chain that puts in some decent connectivity, and certainly the Sofitel at Terminal 5 at Heathrow, has done a fantastic job of putting in some real top-end connectivity, and I would be more than happy to do a webcast from there. TV studios, for example, Tony Callan at the Media Centre in Cardiff, they've got a 6,500 square foot television studio, and they've put in some super internet connectivity, because actually, just because it's a television studio and we've labelled it television studio doesn't mean it can't be an internet studio. And the Westminster one, Westminster Live, they've done exactly the same thing. TV studios are actually beginning to think, right, actually this is not just all about HD and all the rest of it, it's also about good connectivity. So I think there's 2 elements. I think the first hotel chain that puts in a really good, rock-solid receive end, transmit end, is going to make a fortune.
Can I ask Richard a question, actually? Here we go. This is bad news. Could be. You ready? No, I'm just literally curious from something you said, at how much impact do you think that the Olympics of 2012 have made in terms of the connectivity that was shown, how unbelievably technically complicated and how simple it was made by various people, actually, and a lot of people worked very hard and raised the bar quite considerably. Do you think now, and a lot of people saw that and witnessed it, do you think people in your area, certainly your sector, do you think they will appreciate that and move on from that?
No.
You don't think they'll get it?
No, don't think they've got it. Haven't made the connect. What's the Olympics got to do with pharmaceuticals? What's the Olympics? And I think that why? Because there is an obsession with labelling. Forgive me, but I came from a world of sound, and on the desks, on the early desks, you have a little knob called foldback and another one called PA. And, well, that was it. You used the foldback for the foldback and the PA for the PA. Well, then somebody called them MISC 1 and MISC 2. Well, brilliant. You could use them for anything. exactly the same things, they were just different labels. And I think that we've actually got to start looking beyond the labeling. What's a webcast? What's a webinar? What's this? What's that? What we're actually talking about is program making being transmitted over a whole variety of different outcomes. We're talking about a converged society, but I don't think people have actually got there that fast, and I don't actually think people are understanding the business case.
So, I mean, we've talked there, barriers of entry from client perception through to physical things, i.e. where's the network, et cetera, et cetera. What about elements such as, security? Does that ever worry clients that we need to secure an event that only XYZ can come into? I mean, do you come across those? I mean, obviously there's plenty of ways of getting around that, but is that perceived clients?
It's not just security, it's also ROI reporting. The clients are obsessed with how many people are logged on, how many minutes they logged on for, did they watch the whole thing, what slide decks did they download, what else did they do to interact, how many questions and answers we had. There's a whole range of additional things that you can do, and password protection is actually not really well, sometimes it's security, and you have to ask yourself, if it's that secure, don't put it on the web. It should be in a private meeting. But if it's a lot of the password security protection and all the rest of it, it's probably lip service. There's a lovely rule, for example, in pharmaceuticals that says that you are not allowed to promote a prescription medicine in such a way that a member of the public goes along to their GP and say, here, I heard about this medicine, please prescribe it to me. So a lot of the password protection is actually lip service to the fact that you have made some attempt at preventing members of the public from getting on and looking at it. So that's nothing to do with security. So I think there's a whole range of things that you can do. And in many ways, the common interface, the simple things that you can do on TV channels, and that's encryption and all the rest of it, that's just to protect a revenue stream. So I think we don't want to confuse the things.
Typically, and I guess this is one, again, sorry, Kevin, for Nick, for Richard. Well, Nick, I think you answered it slightly earlier on, but Richard, for you, do you actively encourage webcasting? If someone says to you, here's a communication piece, would you put it as a standalone option now for a communication exercise, or wait till the client asks?
Oh, good Lord, no. You've got to be proactive. The point about it is that when it's all a little bit like, when you go into McDonald's, would you like fries or onion rings, or would you like a dessert or a coffee? It's all about selling up. But I also think it's about offering clients best advice. We as a production company, in fact, we were talking about this earlier, the way that we charge, and I think that we charge for our time. What are we selling? We are selling our knowledge, we are selling our ability, we are selling reassurance, we're selling all sorts of things. The client comes to us simply for one reason. We've done it before, we know what to do, they're not having to pay for the development costs, and we're giving them best advice. And it's trust, and I think that we have to look at all the ways of communicating. What we've got to do, it all starts from a very simple point. What modification of behavior or what action do you want the target audience to take or make as a result of being involved in this communication? That is the starting point. It is very rare that a client comes to us and says, we want a conference, we want a website, we want this, we want that. We have this specific issue that we have to communicate. What do you suggest we do to communicate it? And the other thing that I always say, if I'm going to go through ridiculous things to say, is that far too often communications fails for two reasons. One, people get obsessed with the technology. Do you actually ask a gardener what spade they're going to use? No, you actually talk to a gardener about what plants they're going to plant and what the pattern and the shape is. And the second one is that most communications fail because those doing the communicating make a list of the things they want to tell the audience as opposed to what it is the audience wants to know. And I think that, we've got to actually start using all the tools at our disposal. Don't force a webcast on somebody when it's not going to work, just because webcasting's the thing. And, I think a lot of people have tried to do that. Oh, yes, we've got to have an app. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. There's so many things. There's almost a mantra that people get, judged on, or they get their bonus at the end of the year. Let's start looking at the proper, right way to communicate.
Kevin, to you, if I may. So you talk about the RSM being, CPD, so continuous professional development for doctors and medical professionals. So how does that work? Presumably that's people watching on-demand events rather than live, and they get a test at the end. And how do you prove that they've watched it and actually they get their points? How does that?
That is exactly it. They take a test at the end.
Right.
And I mean, interesting as well, this is something we've been able to monetize, which is not something you often get to do with streaming video, although it's often talked about. But when you've got something as valuable as CPD points, therefore it can be an exchange.
So that's my next question, yeah. So presumably for your live events, you're in a world where people probably pay to come as a delegate to an event. Is there a charge, is there a pay-per-view platform across people coming into a live event, or like watch it online, it's free, turn up, you've got to pay whatever, £1,000 or whatever else?
We found, well, from a client's point of view, none of them have wanted to charge for the online.
But they may charge for the bums in seats face-to-face.
Absolutely.
Right.
Course, yeah.
So potentially that's perceived as lost revenue. So I guess it goes back to my question is, do they view the person remotely as important as the person bum in seat? That's telling me they probably don't.
Well, I think it's mainly whether that person was ever going to come to the live event. I mean,
right.
Especially
Okay.
if they're not even in this country, they were never intending to travel.
Right.
Then they
Okay.
have expanded the audience.
So an extended audience who wouldn't have turned up anyhow.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. And in terms of invite, do people hold back on inviting to people more locally? For a last-minute webcast, say, okay, there is webcasting, but we're not going to tell anyone until the day before when they're obviously not coming.
Some clients have done that.
Intentionally so,
yes, yeah.
right. Okay.
But I was going to say, from a venue's point of view, actually offering streaming services has made us more attractive as a venue. And even if a client has not gone on to use streaming services, they've booked us because maybe that tipped the balance over another venue. They were thinking about streaming, didn't go through with it, but in the end we've got the revenue from their actual booking.
And presumably if you are offering streaming, you've then got an upsell, if you want to call it that, on production values, cameras, camera guys, whether using remote heads or manned cameras. That's an additional cost that you can charge, presumably, as a venue to a client who may not have had the whole thing filmed anyhow.
Exactly, and that's the whole point from we were looking at last year when third-party suppliers were bringing streaming services to our clients under our noses, as it were, and we obviously had an idea of the revenue that they were getting from that. It was obvious to us to bring it in-house.
So that was your driver from, look, these guys are bringing in likes of TalkPoint or whoever to come and do one-off events. Hang on, we can do that at a cheaper rate to the client, I'm assuming, and also make it a revenue stream. That was the driver.
Well, obviously, because we're in-house, we're able to offer it at a cheaper rate. I mean, when a guy just sits with a laptop, links up to our network, and he's providing a service that he's charging £3,000 to £5,000 for a day, it was obviously very attractive. And it should have been an easy business case to put forward to my boss, but obviously the recession was biting last year, and it was very difficult to actually get that case across, and it took a lot of negotiating with certain suppliers to actually get one that met our budget.
We've got about just over 5 minutes or so to go now.
Can I just say that I just thought that actually, as you've just done yourself out of a job, mate, because the RSM has just suddenly become an incredibly attractive proposition for a production company.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, that's all right, mate. Best pitch you've ever done. No, I mean it, because that's what I mean about venues with the right connectivity. Yeah. But I still I'll probably still work with Simon because, there's an awful lot of things when you've got a client that's spending £750,000 on an event, they don't pay you to get it wrong.
No, I mean, one of the areas I look at is genuinely trying to convince venues to adopt self-service products, and guys, you can sell these services, and I've seen a lot of barriers from selling into event venues. I really am, in terms of saying, why would we do that? We're going to do ourselves out of a job. So, unfortunately, none of them sat in the audience here today.
So, just a quick one, and that is obviously from where I sit, it's all about content. So content drives everything. So, I think, the technology is here and it's available if given the right connectivity and the right bandwidth.
Thanks, mate.
We can do all sorts of things, and it's really how exciting and how engaging can we make that.
Great. Guys, we've got about 5 or so minutes. I don't know if there's any questions from the floor. Anyone wants to talk? Talk it over, and I'll repeat it. What do you think?
I think I said pile of shite.
I'll just repeat that for the camera. So basically, the question on what would you consider in a venue a good standard of connectivity?
Absolutely no idea. I rely on people like my streaming people, Simon, etc., to tell me. And actually, I think there's two issues there. There is speed, but there is also reliability, contention, etc., etc. I can't answer that question, but all I know is when somebody says it's a pile of shite and I'm going to listen to them, or it drops out every 5 minutes, you know, I think that probably, from what I've been told, is more important. It is the certainty of the connection, not necessarily the speed.
And just an addendum from me on that. I know you weren't asking me, but I think you know, mostly the venues are not geared up really properly at the moment, and they need to gear up because you know, our experience is that half the time people are running around trying to plug in ISD endpoints and sorting that out. They've got no idea what they're doing. There's a big mainframe somewhere, matrix somewhere in the cellar, and nobody knows where it is. I mean, these are really basic stuff that we used to have years gone by with audio-visual. Now, the audio-visual stuff has improved no end. You know, projectors are better, sound systems are better in venues, and I think that we need to get to that level with connectivity.
Any other questions from the floor? Hi.
I have a question for Kevin. What was the decision-making criteria for your self-service webcasting?
So Kevin, I'll just repeat that for the camera. So what was the decision-making process for your self-service webcasting?
From a budget point of view, from a revenue.
Sounds like it's budget.
Purchasing.
Was there other factors?
I mean, it was really because we were seeing this service being offered under our noses, and therefore we didn't see why we shouldn't expand that as an in-house team. We were always trying to expand our services.
No, I thought that was, but you had a variety of different venues which you chose to from. What was the decision-making criteria for choosing that venue?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
What was it? The main criteria, was it budget? That's the cheapest, or you know, what was the main criteria that made you choose who you went with in terms of the service you wanted to offer?
Well, there were certain criteria in the sense that we very particularly wanted the kind of setup we had, slides and video alongside each other with the setup for feedback for an online audience, these kind of basic attributes. But really, at the end of the day, it came down to budget. And a lot of suppliers they asked it for a startup fee, which I just didn't have in budget. So we had to sort of negotiate away a startup fee, which happened, and in the end managed to negotiate a 3-month free trial, which in the end meant we'd started the service, proved it was working, and I was able to sell it to my boss as a revenue stream, and he was bought and sold.
Thank you.
That scares me slightly, I'm afraid. I'm reminded of the astronaut who was sitting on top of the moon rocket with 1 million tons of TNT under him. And as he said, as he was thrust into space and into orbit, how reassured he was that everything below him was bought on a least cost option.
Maybe I should have qualified it.
You just done yourself out of that job.
I'll qualify that statement. The supplier we got, they were also getting something from us, basically a UK presence. They wanted a foot in the door, a reasonably good name, the Royal Society of Medicine. So it was a give and take. I don't think, you know, they would repeat that too often.
I think, I want to say, I think that the whole point about it is that we have clients that say to us, why don't you have your own in-house cameraman? We talked about this earlier, simply because if I want an underwater cameraman, I want the best underwater cameraman in the world, not our in-house cameraman with a load of lead weights on them. And I think that our clients, when they are spending an awful lot of money, you can't just look at the cost of the webcast, you need to look at the cost of everything, the holistic cost, the cost of the speakers, the cost of the audience, the value of what they're trying to, if they're trying to communicate a billion dollar product, and you say to them, well, we were able to save 200 quid on this, they're going to wipe you off the face of the earth. They're never going to work with you again. And that is the reason why, above all, we've talked about we've talked about the technology, we've talked about everything. What we haven't talked about is the ability and the quality of the people that go into putting together world-class web events. That is absolutely page one essential, because without that, all the technology in the world fails.
Right. On that note, unless there's any more questions from the floor, on the sake of time, I'll end things there and say thank you to the panel. Kevin, Richard, Nick, myself, and thanks to Mark, sound engineer. Thanks for listening. Thank you.